Hey everybody, welcome back to Euzoia, the podcast where every week we talk about one principle of a good life. And this week and this month we're looking into career and especially about like what makes a good job. And I'm super excited to be here with Nina Friedrich, and you are the director of high impact professionals. So there's already quite a bit in the name there. You hopefully help a lot of people have high impact with their careers and also hopefully be happy with their careers and have good jobs. So I'm super excited to learn all the ins and outs about this. And yeah, maybe as a way to start, I would be curious, like you are the director of high impact professionals now, but I think I saw started out as a software engineer, which is of course like very far from like leading career advisory organizations. And I also have a bit of a background in software engineering. So I'm curious, like if you think back to that first job, like just from a like happiness and well-being perspective, like do you feel like you're happier now? Like did this change, or like which factors play a role there for yourself?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. First of all, very excited
Of
to be
course.
here. Very excited for the conversation today. I think there are different factors, some that pull me more towards happier and some that pull me more away from that. I think overall the balance is going towards happier. So I think that part of the scale is sort of weighing heavier, but I do think that there are trade-offs, as with everything in life. There's barely ever a perfect version. So how do those things look like? On the side that I think is making me happier compared to working as a software engineer and working in the corporate setting is that I'm actually working on the topics that I think are incredibly important and that I would want more people to work on. And just not having this cognitive dissonance between I think I should do X and I do Y. So that part is gone, which really helps with just not having to fight that on a daily basis. The people that I'm working with are really motivated to want to make the world a better place. And it's just so wonderful to work with people like that, both inside of high impact professionals itself, the program participants and alumni that we work with, and also the organizations that we collaborate with. So it's just a really wonderful ecosystem. One very specific aspect of the ecosystem is that it's incredibly collaborative. So organizations that would in the corporate world be considered competitors are actually heavily working together because we're all trying to achieve something very similar. So doing that together actually means that we can do more good. So there's a lot of sharing of learnings and resources and those kind of things, which is just very different to the corporate side. And I think that's just works for my setup. I'm not a particularly competitive person, so it is on some aspects, but overall I like the collaborative mindset much more. And it's also just really interesting topics. So how do you get people to pivot their career towards really pressing global problems is actually a really interesting challenge. And yeah, I think a more interesting nut to crack than what I was working on as a software engineer.
Right.
In terms of what makes me less happy, I think the tackling those problems on a day-to-day basis also means that you're confronted with them on a day-to-day basis, which you may have been anyway, because I think a lot of people worry about the state of the world. So this is not exclusively true for people who work on those topics, but I think it can be really challenging to confront them daily. So that I think has an impact on happiness. And I also find that switching off from it is much harder because if you really, really care about what you're working on, it is much harder than, oh, well, if this thing doesn't get, isn't perfect, then some rich person's going to get slightly less rich counterfactually. So it seems fine. Whereas if you're actually trying to work on getting people to tackle some of the really large problems that we have in the world, then it does actually matter. So yeah, that I guess goes against happy on a day-to-day or moment-to-moment setting.
Yeah, I think that resonates a lot. I think especially this cognitive dissonance, like when I was working for BCG, for example, I felt like, it's an interesting job, right? I work with interesting people, I work on interesting problems, but like it felt like so far removed than what I felt would help as a society and civilization to make progress. But then also what you mentioned is like maybe you're like you see it much more day to day, the suffering or like whatever you're working on, right? Like how is that with people you advise? I guess you see a lot of like kind of before after switches where people switch from maybe more corporate job to one where they're working on more of these things. Like does one or the other outweigh things? Is like anybody who like regrets having made the move? I'm not sure actually how much follow up you do, but I'd be curious. Yeah.
Yeah. So the program that we run, our Impact Accelerator program, the community aspect is a really core core part of the program. And we've now had 550 people who've either gone through the program or are currently going through. So it's a really amazing community of people. Many of those have already made the career transition themselves. So we're very close to 100 people who've switched into a high impact career of those folks. So it is really valuable for the community to stay engaged, and for a lot of our alumni want to give back to the latest rounds. So a lot of our facilitators in the program are alumni themselves. So we do stay in contact with them, very regularly. And so do hear how it's going for them. So we do actually have a really good view into that, not just through like some cold survey, but through like actually staying in touch with them. And I think for a lot of them, they have already been thinking about wanting to do good. And that often comes from a drive of, well, the world isn't great and could be a lot better. So I think a lot of people are already thinking about that. We do push people to really think about how can they do the most good with their career rather than just some good, because there's a really big difference between them. So it can be quite uncomfortable for some people to think about those, okay, right, where's like really the biggest amount of suffering happening? And I think people are just really aware of it. If you read the news or something, you just constantly hear how bad the world is and how many bad things are happening. So I think in general, people are very much aware of that. So I think being confronted with it is not something that's new to them, but the actually actively doing something against it, which I think is just really empowering and freeing. And at least you're doing your best to make that better, is therefore the change that they didn't have before in most cases.
I guess it's kind of removing this cognitive dissonance, and it can feel very empowering, I guess, if you see you can actually make a change, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess this, like, seeing you can already make a change is maybe one factor of what makes good jobs anywhere. Like a job where you actually have some autonomy and see the effects of your work, right? Like apart from impact, like what do you see as like factors that in general make people happier or less happy when it comes to their jobs?
Yeah. So one of our collaborating organizations that in the corporate world would totally be considered our competitors, but really aren't.
Yeah.
80,000 hours. They have done some really great research on that. So the 5 ingredients that they have identified is engaging work. So, clear work and have the freedom to like how you do your work that helps others. So again, this like meeting component, work that you're good at. So actually doing something that you
Turns out.
can do well, turns out is pretty useful rather than just being stuck and lost all the time. I think that makes sense. Supportive colleagues, I think, is really important, and is something that they found is really important. And then no major negatives. So, you can have the score perfectly on all 4 of those. If you need to spend an hour and a half in traffic jam every morning and every evening, then that's not going to be great for you. If you have a pay that either means you can't sustain your setup in life, or something that they identified as well is if it feels unfair compared to other people, then that's negative as well. So those are things that, I would agree with those factors. I think the combination of doing something that matters, doing something that you're good at, doing something where you have autonomy over, not having any massive downsides, I think that makes sense. A really important combination.
Yeah, you mentioned one of the big downsides is commute, and I guess like a lot of people actually have quite a big commute. I think your work is remote, right? Like, were all the jobs remote always, or like did you make that change at some point? Like how did that affect your well-being?
Yeah, my commute is about, I don't know, 7.5 meters or something. So pretty short. Yeah, so it was not by choice. When I was going back to the software engineering days, I started being in the office every day, and then the pandemic hit. So we were all forced to go remote, and I actually left that job and started a new one during the pandemic. So therefore I didn't come back to the office there, which was another thing that we have in common, was a strategy consulting role. have ticked that box as well at some point in my past. And that one, so the office was in London, clients were across the UK and sometimes in Germany. So it didn't really make sense for me to going down to London. I did it once in a while, but not that often. So I was mainly remote, and that was like really just me, and mostly me in my little office or my little desk. And then these days, I think it's much more of a mix, in the sense that as a team, we're we don't currently have two people that are in the same country, and we're not even on the same continent. So therefore, it doesn't make sense that we get together regularly, but we do make sure that we do get together in person. However, there's a co-working space in Cambridge where I live that hosts a bunch of people who are working on the world's most pressing problems as well. So it's really great to go in a couple of times a week and work with people there, and just, having some time to share ideas and thoughts with others over lunch and those kind of things. So yeah, I really appreciate having that opportunity. So I quite like a mix. I think it really has pros and cons working remotely. So yeah, making sure you play towards that, I think, is important.
Do you feel it's like a character trait, or like is there like people where just like works a lot better, or do you think it's something you can get used to, based on kind of the people you've been working with?
Yeah, so it might depend on the type of role that you're doing. If you're someone who has to go really, like if you're a researcher who gets some big question and then actually just has to go deep for 2 weeks, you might much prefer having a quiet office where you can just really focus and don't have anyone who goes, oh, actually, can you send me this thing? Oh, actually, sorry, can you do this? And you just really need your full brain power for a long chunk of your time, and don't want to get thrown out of that. I think that could be really beneficial. I think in general, and for most people, you lose the power of being able to quickly coordinate with people in your team, and like really making sure that you set that up well within a team. I think is something that is important to do. I think as a society, we've learned a lot around that since the start of the pandemic, which is already so surprisingly long ago, really. So yeah, I think we have better systems in place. There are much better software in place to do this. So I think it's a real trade-off between communicating frequently and having like great structures in place, and also like really deliberately getting together in person. So we do that around 3 times a year around big conferences, where we really say, okay, the few days before, we all going to work together and be really thoughtful around what we want to do in those days, and like really getting together, getting to know each other better, and those kind of things are just much easier to do in person.
Yeah. I'm thinking again about like all the people you've kind of been working with to kind of maybe go through these career changes, and like I guess impact, at least in people I talk to, like everybody likes the idea of having a job where they feel like they can contribute, but then it seems like the number of those jobs just doesn't match the demand, or like it's something maybe hard to get. So what kind of predicts, or like for which kind of people does it make sense to kind of go after those roles, or like where do you maybe what do you see working when people want to get high impact jobs?
Yeah, so it sounds like you're talking about roles at high impact organizations, so probably even high impact charities specifically, where for a lot of roles it is very competitive, especially for the more junior roles. We tend to work with we exclusively work with mid and senior career folks. So it is still competitive there. And also the organizations are struggling to get really top people for a lot of the roles. So it really depends on what the role is and what type of expertise people have. There's a lot more people in the ecosystem who are coming fresh out of university or have worked in the space for a few years or something like that, but far fewer people who come in with, who could be the CFO of an organization that has 150 people or something like that. So that's much harder to get. In terms of, so your question was around what sets people apart that are...
Yeah, maybe because my assumption is you've seen a lot of people who are like, I want to have more impact.
Yeah.
How can I have this? And then some probably succeed and end up in roles where they do have this, and maybe some stay in the pipeline or kind of drop off, or like, and are there maybe patterns in who ends up where on the spectrum?
So I would say one of the biggest one is how agentic people are on their path to getting that, and also maybe how creative they are and how they're tackling this. So I would say not just in the high impact space, especially for experienced professionals, where there are actually a lot of roles where people are desperately needed to go into them. There are also so many more roles that can do good that aren't just work at a high impact nonprofit. So there could be policy areas where you can really impact some big decisions on some of the really pressing problems. This could be working in industry, like for example, if you care about animal welfare, could be working in the food policy space, could be working in big corporations that are making decisions on what kind of things do they stock and how do they talk about it and where do they place them and like those kind of things. So there are really important roles like journalism, media, how you talk about animals or how you talk about global health, or whether you present some of those pressing problems or choose to focus on local things, that can have a really big implication on how many people are aware of these things, how many people choose to put money towards it, how many people choose to enter the space, how many people choose to talk to their friends and family and colleagues around it. So I think there's lots of things that people can do, especially people who come in with experience, skills in that work that's interesting. So for people to like get really creative around how they can fit in and how they can contribute, I think is really important. Kind of how much people want it, so how willing they are
Right.
to push. For almost all cases, there are a bunch of rejections involved, and it's really important to get to know the ecosystem and get to know individuals in the ecosystem. And often those people come from the outside, so therefore they don't have that network to begin with. So like pushing over that hurdle and keeping going there. I think for individuals, it also really matters whether they push by themselves or whether they're a part of a community, which is why for us, that community aspect is so important, because it is sometimes so hard to see the positive side of things when you only see your perspective. So say someone got to the final round of an application and then didn't get the role. The final round hurts so much more than any of the other
Right.
rounds because you're so much closer, but also you did so much better. Clearly there's some signal there. Clearly there's something of, hey, you actually, seem to be getting really close. And it's so much easier to see that from the outside. It's so much easier to see that on someone else. That's amazing. I mean, obviously really
Right.
devastating. I'm really sorry for you, but also please allow yourself to celebrate. So if you don't get that input and don't have people around you that understand why you want to do good with your career and why that matters to you, it can be really hard to do this. So having the community in place, I think, is really important as well. And then obviously having skills that are needed in the first place, right? Like
Helps.
being
Yeah.
really good at what you're doing, and that are the kinds of skills that are needed in those types of roles. But it's so broad of what's needed that I think being good at what you're doing is more important than exactly what you're doing.
I had a question and then I forgot the question. Let me think. Yeah. You mentioned community was really important for this sense of belonging, this like dealing better with rejection in general, just like staying motivated to go on the hunt. And of course, with Euzoia, we're also trying to build community. And I'm curious, like, how do you approach that? How do you build community? How do you help people connect with each other, feel welcome? What's your magic?
Yeah, oh man, what's our magic? I think the big components are thinking about the individuals that you have in the community, especially the ones that you think are really gonna bring the big impact home, and how you can support them best. So really start with, okay, the people that we're most excited about, what is it that they need? What can we give them through the community? And always keeping in mind that the community also means that a lot of bottlenecks will be taken away. So if everything goes through us as an organization and nothing happens within the community, then it means we are the bottleneck for anyone to connect with anyone else, or for people to get ideas and thoughts and feedback and like those kind of things. So the more we can take ourselves away as a bottleneck, the more people can build whatever they find most useful. So like really thinking about putting the structure in place so that people can use whatever's most useful for them, and then making it in a way that it's an offer rather than they have to do it, but also encouraging them to share. So I think something that's really important is building a safe space where people can talk about topics that are really important to them. And the way we do that in our program is that we run a cohort-based program. So it's 5 people plus facilitator who run through the 6 weeks of the program together. And then it's lots of cohorts that run at the same time. So we're currently wrapping up a round of the program where we have 22 cohorts who run in parallel. And in any given cohort, those people will get to know each other really well. The way we run those cohorts is that the participants decide what they want to discuss, and everyone gets a slot in a mastermind session, as they're called, and they decide what's the topic that will be most useful for them to discuss. They share some of their thinking and some of the relevant background, and then it's a big brainstorming session of the rest of the cohort on that topic. And it's just so incredibly powerful to get 5 other brains on on the obstacle that you have in front of you for half an hour. It's so rare that you get that, right? Normally, even if you have a half an hour one-on-one conversation, you will then talk about the other person, or you will talk about different things, or you don't go quite deep. So it's just incredibly rare that you get this kind of brainstorming set up. And it means that people get really invested into each other's paths as well. I think by about week 2, people come as much for the other people in the cohort as they come for themselves, because they really want to see, oh, this person, where are they going to go and what are they going to do? And I think that just really means that it has this whole collaborative aspect. So like putting structures in place that allow this, whether it's the cohort sessions, whether it's like a Slack ecosystem where people can discuss, and I think also an in-person component if it works. So around big conferences where a lot of us are going to, we'll make sure that we meet up in person on one of the nights and go out for drinks or something like that. Again, thinking about, hey, who are the people who should be connecting, going around and be like, oh, hey, have you two chatted to each other? I think you would be really valuable for each other. So making that possible, I think is really, really valuable to think about. Like, think really, what do you want to offer to people? How can you facilitate this? And how can you take yourself out of it as much as possible? But any well-run community means there's a lot of work under the hood that ideally people don't see.
Right.
Yeah. So thinking about what's useful for people. How can you?
Yeah, right. No, I love this
facilitate that?
mastermind idea. I can totally see how that builds this like connection and investment in each other. And I've
It is
done it
so
a few
powerful.
times
Yeah.
in like a founder setting, but yeah, this totally makes sense. I was just thinking, like in an earlier answer, you mentioned like, well, just be good at the skills that you have and you'll get hired. But of course, nowadays, like a lot of people are worried. It's like AI is like, are my skills still relevant? Like, which skills actually are relevant? Mm. Yeah, have you seen a big shift in like what people are looking for, or what's getting people hired, or is it basically the same but now with like, and also can use AI on top?
Yeah. So I think at the moment it hasn't shifted that much, given we're working with mid and senior professionals. I think it has more shifted on the junior end, and then specifically on junior software engineers, probably slightly less harder to get in these days. So it's more on the end that we're not working with, so therefore we haven't seen it that much. I think that just being very agentic is very useful. It's probably like, if there's one skill that is overarching for any role, that's probably the one. And that also means that you will probably be much more likely to adapt and use AI tools where they're useful, see where they aren't yet super helpful. Yeah.
Have
So
you
one,
seen like on this, have you seen strategies that work for people to become more agentic? I think like the thing I've seen or said before is like maybe start with small goals, kind of learn that you can actually achieve things and then kind of go from there and try to kind of stack it up and up and up. Would you agree with this, or like any other strategies on becoming more agentic?
yeah, I think training up that muscle is really useful. And I think this is also something that you can do in program design to nudge people more towards it. So
Mm.
in the workbook that we have that people go through in the program, it breaks down this like big hairy question of how do I do the most good with my career and how do I get there, into weekly chunks. There are weekly readings and, much more importantly, weekly actions, and it breaks it down into like making progress every week. A lot of those actions are outward facing, and they start outward facing. They start with quite small actions early on, but it trains up that muscle so that the final career change is still a big step, but it's slightly smaller if you've done a bunch of things in that direction before already. There's a really good book that I'm reading at the moment called "You Can Just Do Things" by Kate Hall. So I would recommend that. Seems very
It's on
good.
the list.
Seems very agentic in the sense of very little fluff in the book, very much to the point, and very much here's what you actually need to do. And I know it was uncomfortable, and here's how you actually get better. So I think
I
that's
love it.
great.
All right, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah,
Okay,
has a
maybe to
lot of things like getting feedback fast, being very clear of what you want to do, being uncomfortable when looking stupid, and putting yourself out there and like those kind of things. So yeah, a lot of the things that just mean try to push for your goals as fast as you can. Try to take the shortcut if there's one.
maybe to close it off. Yeah, Euzoia is at the end of the day about like living a good life, feeling good, like some kind of like happiness. If you look around with like all the people you have worked with, or also like in your network, like who do you think are the happiest people in your work? Like, just do specific people come up, or like what's their magic?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. So I thought about this in like clusters of groups that I work with. So I started off in academia, did slightly too many years of maths at university. So I've seen that world, which is probably more similar to the software engineering world, but also still quite different than the strategy consulting world, which is very quite different from that. And now running a nonprofit, again, really quite different. So I've seen like different types of people and like different interactions and different, like really quite different roles. I think they all have their pros and cons. I think the group of people that I think are probably the happiest that I have engaged with through all of those different setups. And I would be interested to hear what you think, because you have engaged with this ecosystem as well, is the people who run organizations through or have set up organizations through charity entrepreneurship and are in the AIM ecosystem. I think they have this combination of tackling something that's really important. So like getting feedback on actually making things better, also having this really tight-knit community of other founders in the space, having really interesting challenges and being selected for being the type of person who would be good at those challenges. So I think that's one of the ecosystem that just seems to me to be very, very, like, very happy despite working on really hard challenges and like having some like various sacrifices to their lives on various components. But it just seems that ecosystem, which we're a part of with High Impact Professionals, as HIP is actually itself an organization that was co-founded through charity entrepreneurship. So we have like a tight connection with them. And I think that, like really tight community of people who just really do amazing things, I think is a really great combination.
Right. Yeah, I think that I think I can think of a few counterexamples, but usually that's then on the like major downsides thing. Maybe there's like financial insecurity because like funding isn't clear or some other big reasons. But otherwise, yeah, I think this combination of community and impact and interesting problems and this kind of autonomy agency that kind of comes with the job of founding something is leads to quite a bit of happiness. I think I'd agree there.
Yeah. And I think whether it's like moment to moment happiness, I'm not sure. They could probably think about things they would rather do on like any given moment. But I don't think you will have the best life if you optimize for moment to moment happiness. You'll probably end up with some doom scrolling or something. But though whether that's your moment to moment perfect happiness, I don't know. But like, I don't know, maybe spending a lot of time in nature and spending a lot of time with friends, which seems great, but you will probably be missing like the bigger meaning component of your life if you optimize for moment to moment happiness.
I had a similar conversation with Julia Wise, who about like having children and if you want to optimize for moment to moment happiness, that's like probably not what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. Would you rather sleep well or not? Well, I'd rather sleep well. Would you rather be able to choose what you can do on your weekend or not? Well, I'd rather be able to choose that. But would you rather have kids or not? Well, that's, for a lot of people actually would rather have kids, even though it comes with a lot of moment to moment downsides.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this was super fun. I just wanted to give you room if there was anything else you wanted to share or maybe things we didn't touch on yet that you felt were interesting for the audience to consider.
Yeah, maybe just how people can make use of high impact professionals. So we've already touched on our Impact Accelerator program. We currently run 3 versions of that a year. So do check that out. And there's always, at the very least, a waiting list, if not an open application. We have a talent directory. So if people are looking to get onto the radar of those high impact organizations, put yourself onto there, because a lot of organizations are using that for their hiring rounds. We have published a book earlier this year. So our co-founder, Devin Woods, has written and published that. And it's a really great toolkit of what are the structures and resources of how I should be thinking about this. What are some really useful frameworks, some exercises, some example stories of what people have done, some really concrete paths of how you can have impact with your life and with your career. Yeah, so would recommend those. Join our newsletter if you want to hear more about what we're doing at High Impact Professionals. I should say our Impact Accelerator program is a free program. You join the talent directory for free as well. So yeah, do check that out and hopefully that's useful.
Amazing. We'll put all of those into the links and into the blog post. And yeah, thanks again for coming on. I really enjoyed this. And I kind of want to do the program myself now. I'm not sure I have time, but it sounds a lot of fun. Thanks,
Fantastic.
Nina.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right.